The lunch rush was in full swing at a popular downtown cafe when Michael, a hard-working man who had just finished a long shift, walked in for a quick bite. He wasn't expecting anything unusual, just a moment to unwind, enjoy his meal, and head home. But as he stepped up to the counter, the energy in the room suddenly shifted. Whispers spread, eyes darted toward him, and a tense silence followed. Michael was wearing a bright red MAGA hat. It wasn't a political statement for him. It was just a hat he had worn many times before. But today, it caught the attention of the cafe's manager, a woman named Lisa, who immediately approached him with a tight-lipped expression. She folded her arms and, in a firm voice, said, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to take off your hat." At first, Michael thought he misheard her. He looked around confused. "Excuse me," he asked. Lisa's voice didn't waver. "We don't allow political attire in here. It makes other customers uncomfortable." Michael glanced around the cafe, noticing a few patrons looking down at their phones, pretending not to listen. Others exchanged glances, waiting to see what he would do next. He felt his pulse quicken. Was this really happening? Was he being singled out just for wearing a hat? He took a deep breath, keeping his voice calm. "I'm just here to eat," he said. "I'm not bothering anyone." Lisa shook her head. "It's store policy," she insisted. "I'm going to have to ask you to remove it or leave." A heavy silence fell over the cafe. Some customers whispered to each other, while others avoided eye contact. Michael could feel the weight of every stare, every unspoken judgment. He wasn't the kind of person to look for trouble, but he also wasn't the kind to back down when he felt something wasn't right. As the tension in the air thickened, something unexpected happened, something that no one, not even Lisa, saw coming. And what happened next? Well, you won't believe it. Stay tuned. Michael stood still for a moment, his heart pounding. He had been in uncomfortable situations before, but something about this felt different. The way Lisa was looking at him, the quiet murmurs around the cafe. It was like he had done something wrong just by walking in. But all he did was wear a hat. A hat that, to him, was just another piece of clothing. "I don't understand," Michael finally said, keeping his voice steady. "People wear all kinds of things every day. Sports team logos, band t-shirts, even political slogans. Why is my hat a problem?" Lisa sighed, her expression tight. "Sir, I'm just enforcing the rules. We don't want anything that could cause conflict." Conflict. The word hung in the air. Michael could see a few people shifting in their seats, some clearly uncomfortable, others watching closely, waiting to see what would happen next. A man near the counter, dressed in business casual, glanced at Michael and then back at Lisa. He looked like he wanted to say something but decided against it. Michael exhaled slowly, gripping the strap of his bag. "So, let me get this straight. You're telling me that I can't sit down and have a meal because of my hat?" Lisa hesitated, and for a brief second, doubt flickered across her face. Maybe she hadn't expected him to question it. Maybe she thought he would just leave quietly. But now, with all eyes on them, it wasn't so simple. One of the baristas behind the counter, a young woman with dark curls, glanced between Lisa and Michael. She looked nervous, like she was debating whether to speak up. Another customer, a middle-aged woman in a grey blazer, leaned in to whisper to the person next to her. Whatever she said made the other person nod. Michael could feel the tension thickening around him. He wasn't trying to make a scene. He just wanted to understand. If this was really about store policy, why had he never seen it apply to anyone else? Why did it feel so personal? Lisa crossed her arms, as if bracing herself. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I just need you to respect the rules." Michael studied her face, searching for any sign that she might reconsider. But before he could respond, a voice from the back of the cafe cut through the silence. "That's not right," someone said. And just like that, the whole situation took an unexpected turn. Michael turned toward the voice. It came from an older man sitting near the window, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He set it down and leaned forward, his expression firm. "That's not right," he repeated, looking directly at Lisa. "You can't just tell a paying customer what he can and can't wear." A ripple of unease passed through the cafe. Lisa's posture stiffened, but she didn't respond right away. Michael glanced at the man, surprised. He hadn't expected anyone to step in. Up until now, it felt like everyone was either watching in silence or pretending not to notice. But now, this stranger had changed the dynamic. Another voice chimed in, this time from the young barista behind the counter. "I mean, I don't remember hearing about any official policy like that." She hesitated, eyes darting toward Lisa, as if unsure whether she was about to get in trouble for speaking up. "We've never told people they couldn't wear sports hats or, other stuff with messages on it." Lisa shot her a look, but before she could say anything, the middle-aged woman in the grey blazer, who had been whispering before, turned in her seat. "I think the issue is bigger than just a hat," she said carefully. "Some symbols mean different things to different people." Michael studied her, trying to gauge where she was coming from. "So, what are you saying?" he asked. She sighed. "I'm saying that some people might see it and feel uncomfortable." Michael nodded slowly, his frustration growing. "So my presence is making people uncomfortable." He let the question hang in the air. "I walked in here like anyone else, just wanting a meal. I didn't say anything to anyone, but suddenly, my hat is a problem." Lisa cleared her throat. "Look, I understand where you're coming from, but I also have to think about my customers." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I am a customer." Silence. The tension in the room felt like a stretched wire, ready to snap. The older man near the window shook his head. "I don't like where this is going," he muttered. "It starts with telling people what they can wear, then what they can say." Another customer, a younger guy with headphones around his neck, finally spoke up. "If you tell him to leave because of his hat, where does it stop?" Lisa looked around the cafe, suddenly realizing that she had lost control of the situation. What had started as a simple request had turned into something much bigger. Michael could feel a shift in the air. More people were paying attention now. More people were questioning what was happening. But just as he was about to respond, the door to the cafe swung open, and someone new walked in. And in that moment, everything changed. The cafe door swung open with a sharp chime, drawing everyone's attention. A man in a navy suit stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room before settling on the tense standoff near the counter. His presence alone shifted the energy. He had the air of someone used to being in charge, calm, confident, but observant. Lisa straightened as soon as she saw him. "Oh, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice suddenly more controlled. Michael watched the exchange carefully. He didn't know who this man was, but Lisa's reaction told him he was someone important. Maybe the owner, maybe a district manager. Either way, it seemed like the situation had just taken another turn. Mr. Carter glanced at Michael, his gaze pausing on the red hat before flicking back to Lisa. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice even but firm. Lisa hesitated. "I was just explaining to this customer that we have a policy against political attire that could make others uncomfortable." Mr. Carter didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around the cafe, taking in the scattered reactions. Some customers avoiding eye contact, others watching with growing interest. The older man near the window, the young barista behind the counter, the guy with headphones, they were all waiting to see what would happen next. Michael met his eyes. "I walked in to grab a meal. I wasn't bothering anyone. She told me I had to take my hat off or leave." Mr. Carter studied him for a moment, then turned back to Lisa. "We have a policy like that." Lisa's lips parted slightly, as if searching for an answer. "Well, no, not officially, but I thought." "But he thought you could enforce something that doesn't exist." His tone wasn't angry, but there was a weight behind it that made Lisa shift uncomfortably. The cafe was dead silent now. Even the espresso machine, usually hissing and steaming, seemed to have quieted in the background. Michael could feel his pulse in his ears. Was this it? Was the situation about to be resolved? But just as it seemed like things might settle, a voice from the back of the cafe cut through the quiet. If he can wear that hat, then I should be able to wear this asterisk. Everyone turned. A man at one of the tables stood up, pulling something out of his bag, and the moment he held it up, the tension in the room hit its breaking point. The man who had spoken stood slowly, holding up a t-shirt he had just pulled from his bag. It was black with bold white lettering across the front. Though the words weren't aggressive, they clearly carried a message, one that, like Michael's hat, sparked strong opinions. A ripple of reactions spread through the cafe. Some people leaned forward, others exchanged glances, and a few visibly tensed up. The air felt heavier now, as if the situation had just taken a new, unpredictable turn. Michael narrowed his eyes slightly, trying to read the man's expression. Was this a challenge? A statement? Or something else entirely? Lisa looked just as caught off guard. "What are you doing?" she asked. The man shrugged. "I'm making a point," he said, shaking the t-shirt slightly. "You said political messages aren't allowed. But what about this? What if I put it on right now? Are you going to tell me to leave too?" Lisa hesitated, and that moment of hesitation spoke volumes. The room felt charged, waiting for her response. Mr. Carter exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. He looked at Lisa, then at Michael, then at the man with the t-shirt. "This is exactly what happens when we start deciding which messages are allowed and which aren't," he said evenly. Michael crossed his arms, watching Lisa carefully. He could see the realization creeping across her face. She had backed herself into a corner. If she let the man wear his shirt, but still insisted that Michael remove his hat, she would be admitting that this wasn't really about a store policy, it was about personal bias. But if she asked both of them to leave, she'd be proving Mr. Carter's point. The young barista cleared her throat nervously. I don't think we should be kicking out customers over stuff like this," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The older man near the window nodded. "She's right," he said. "You can't control what makes people uncomfortable. If you start drawing lines, where do you stop?" The cafe had shifted from quiet tension to open debate. Customers were no longer just watching. They were participating, voicing their thoughts in hushed but urgent tones. Michael felt the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about him. It was about something bigger. Lisa opened her mouth as if to say something, but before she could, the door swung open again. And the second she saw who had just walked in, her face went pale. The moment the door swung open, the entire cafe seemed to freeze. A woman in a dark blazer stepped inside, her eyes immediately locking onto Lisa. There was no need for introductions. Lisa's face said it all. This was someone with authority, someone who mattered. Michael watched as Lisa's shoulders stiffened. "Ms. Reynolds," she said, her voice unusually small. Ms. Reynolds glanced around, taking in the tense atmosphere, the customers whispering, the man still holding up his t-shirt. Her expression remained unreadable as she finally looked at Mr. Carter. "What's going on here?" Mr. Carter folded his arms. "That's what I'd like to know." Lisa swallowed hard. I was trying to keep the peace," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. "I asked him to remove his hat because I thought it might make other customers uncomfortable." Ms. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "And?" Lisa hesitated, and then things escalated. The cafe was silent, waiting. Ms. Reynolds turned to Michael. "Sir, were you causing a disturbance?" Michael met her gaze. "No, I walked in, ordered my food, and was told I couldn't wear my hat." She nodded slightly, then looked at the man with the t-shirt. "And you?" The man shrugged. "I was proving a point." Ms. Reynolds took a slow breath, then turned back to Lisa. "We don't have a policy against political attire, do we?" Lisa shook her head, barely whispering no. "And did this gentleman violate any actual rules?" Lisa's eyes darted around as if looking for an escape, but there wasn't one. "No." The weight of the moment settled in. The young barista looked relieved, the older man near the window gave a small nod, and the guy with headphones smirked like he had seen it coming. Ms. Reynolds sighed. "Then I think we're done here." She turned to Michael. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. You're welcome to stay and enjoy your meal." Michael studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Thank you." As the tension dissolved, the cafe slowly returned to normal. People turned back to their drinks, conversations resumed, and Lisa, looking defeated, quietly retreated to the back. Michael sat down at a corner table, finally able to take a breath. He hadn't planned for any of this, he just wanted a meal. But as he looked around, he realized something important. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about you. It's about the bigger picture. And today, that picture had become a little clearer for everyone in the room.